This is an interview with Brianna Ste Marie. Brianna is a two-time ADCC Trials champion and an ADCC silver medalist. She's one of the best competitors to ever come out of Canada, and most recently, Brianna won the lightweight division of the IBJJF's Premier Gi Invitational Tournament, The Crown. Hey, Brianna. I guess one of the first things that might be good to talk to you about would be your start into the sport, because I know it was quite unorthodox. You originally obviously played rugby rather than jiu-jitsu. So did you find that helped you transition to the sport at all, rather than coming in with no sort of athletic background?
Yeah, definitely. I think coming from a rugby background, it definitely made me like comfortable with contact sports. I think a big obstacle for a lot of people when they start is definitely feeling like a bit awkward, kind of like, you get into class and they're like, okay, time to climb on top of this person that you just met, and, try to bend their arm in a weird direction. So I think that's something that people kind of have to get over as they start the sport, versus when I came in right away, was able to kind of not think twice about it, and just go jump right in. And then obviously, I had also used to kind of that aggressivity, I guess, from the rugby, which I was able to kind of transfer again without feeling so bad in a jiu-jitsu setting. So I think those two things definitely gave me a small edge coming into the sport for sure.
And obviously with you competed at quite pretty high level at rugby as well. So I mean, you're kind of used to the competition side of things as well, I imagine, when you came in.
Yeah, exactly. Like something I've said to people before was, I think because I was always competing, obviously, like I think with honestly most other sports, you have your practices and you have your games, and you would never just like play rugby and only attend the practices. You're obviously going to attend the games as well. So I think for that reason, when I started jiu-jitsu, when competitions came into town, I just signed up because I just assumed that was something that everyone did. I assumed, okay, if if you're going to jujitsu practice, you must be going to the jujitsu games as well. So I was like, oh, competition is here, time to put my name in. And I didn't really think of it as like a question of whether or not I was going to be a competitor. I just thought it was kind of part of the process of like participating in a sport. So I think that was cool because I didn't have to overthink that part of it.
Yeah, and then obviously I imagine it must have been hard as well, because in Canada, obviously the sport's not as big as it is in the States, or certainly not when you sort of first started. So were there many opportunities for competition, especially as a woman in the sport as well?
So it's funny you asked that. I don't know if you were aware of the situation in my province for the past few years, but we actually had this like really um, kind of unique situation where jiu-jitsu competitions about a year after I started became illegal in my province of Quebec. So that was just like it kind of just a bureaucratic mess, to be honest, that took us some years and some really hardworking people to kind of get through. And now, as of like the past year and a half, I believe competitions have been legal again in the province of Quebec. But so basically, I was able to compete in locally as a white belt. And then from blue belt onwards, I was always traveling out of province to compete or out of country, evidently to probably more often out of country to the States.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose as well, that's quite a good preparation, because in terms of the real like high level competition opportunities, they're all outside of Canada, obviously. Do you not find that hard at all, having to commute so much for basically anything you want to do?
Yeah, I think like I was like highly motivated, and I was lucky enough to have at the time Leonardo Saggioro was training in Montreal. He's like a super high level black belt. And he was doing all these major tournaments. So I kind of had that motivation of like we had like a gang going from the gym. And it was like, okay, I have other people who are traveling as well, and that always makes things like a lot easier. But in regards to the situation in my province, who I felt for the most was definitely like I think like the kids, because you have like kids, obviously parents don't have the time necessarily to like fly out to California or the money to the resources for their kids to compete, or even going to down to New York, which is pretty close, but it's still like a weekend trip and whatnot. So I think it was sadly definitely like the younger generations that were probably the most inconvenienced by the situation in the province. But I definitely like again was lucky enough to be surrounded by people who were kind of doing these trips already, so I could kind of just tag along and get a taste for that scene. Yeah.
Oh, nice. And
Mm.
obviously, as the years went on, obviously you kept stepping up in competition, and then when I first personally sort of became aware of you was when you won the first Medusa tournament. Obviously, that was Combat Jiu-Jitsu as well, but I noticed you haven't really done Combat Jiu-Jitsu since then, really. Is that like something you're not really interested in doing anymore, or is it just not an opportunity that's come up lately?
I think like for the right price, I'd be willing to get slapped in the face again. Um, but yeah, I think like the combat jujitsu, I love the experience, to be honest. Like I've always kind of wondered how jujitsu, my jujitsu, like sport jujitsu would fit into this like kind of context where you're allowed to strike. I've always been really nervous about like CTE and like brain damage and stuff. So I've been like a little bit nervous when it comes to like the striking side of martial arts. But I think the combat jujitsu, while there's still obviously risk of brain injury, is maybe like a smaller risk, and it was really actually fun to like get in there and see like it to get really scrappy and like see like, okay, what jujitsu transfers well into this combat setting and what jujitsu is like, oh, maybe that needs to be modified a little bit. But yeah, I ended up honestly doing that because I think it was during the pandemic and there wasn't very many jiu-jitsu competitions evidently, and I kind of was just so desperate to get out there, and then I saw this tournament announced and I was like, you know, I can get slapped in the face. Yeah.
I think it's good that you mentioned that the price aspect of it as well, because obviously that was really early on in your competitive career at this sort of level. But like I said, I sort of noticed you from that, and then pretty much immediately after that, you won ADCC trials back to back as well. That's quite a rare sort of achievement as well. I find that most, because women obviously only have the one trial that they can qualify from. A lot of the time, either female competitors only do the second one, or a lot of the time the person who wins the first one isn't the best person in the bracket that ends up winning the second time round. Was there any particular reason that you went for both rather than saving yourself for the last one or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I had yet to compete in an ADCC rule set. This was I had wanted to do the ADCC trials. I think I would have been like either a blue belt or a purple belt. I wanted to do them just to get that experience, like the previous round of trials. But I was injured at the time. I had like injured my knee, so I couldn't do them. And then going into this season where I knew I had a real shot at winning them, I was like, oh, well, I've never competed under that ADCC rule set. So for me, it was definitely about getting the experience. There's definitely some differences between ADCC and the IBJJF that I was used to. So yeah, I think for me it was really about getting the reps, getting the experience, and I was definitely at that stage of my career where I was also just like saying yes to everything. I was like, okay, I just got to get out there. I just got to like just keep showing up and climb my way up the ranks. You know, be able to get more opportunities offered and all that. So I think it was a kind of a combination of those two things that motivated me to do both trials. Yeah.
So it's funny you mentioned doing like anything that comes around as well, because I know around about the same time you did like a submission only match, wasn't it? That went for about 3 hours.
My God.
Was that something that you sort of would never do again? Because I imagine that's got to be quite a horrible experience at the same time.
I'm happy you recognize the fact that it's horrible because it was in a way. Like I'll start off by saying I'm like thrilled to have had the experience. I've since trained with Hannah Sharp. She's like a really like I remember in that match being like, oh, she's so good at jiu-jitsu. I wish she was a little less good so that this match wouldn't have been 2.5 hours, but she's so good. So I actually contacted her the next time I was in her area to train with her. I think she's great. But yeah, it was like a really intense experience. Like I remember like there was just like so many different moments. Like you're on a journey together, really. Like there's like the initial like 30 minutes where it's kind of just like a regular jiu-jitsu match. Then it starts to get into deeper waters. I remember there was like a solid 30 minutes where all I was thinking about was like a slushy. Like I just needed sugar. I wasn't even thinking about the match anymore. I was just like, I just need to get to a slushy. And then I remember there was like another 30 minutes where I wanted to cry because I really just I wanted her to submit me. I was like, just submit me, like find a way to submit me. And like, but I didn't want to give her a submission, but I was just like also simultaneous. And then I started thinking to myself, like, wow, I can't believe I want to be like the best in the world. And I'm here in a match, like hoping that I get submitted. So then like that made me really like down on myself. I was like, oh, do I have what it takes to be the champ? And then anyways, it was like just like a roller coaster of emotions. And actually when I finished the match, I got in the car and actually had like full body tremors, which I found out after like sometimes like marathon and like triathlon runners get this. So I
Yeah.
was actually concerned, and I wanted to go to the hospital because I was like, oh, I don't know if this is like my teeth were chattering. And then I was trying to drink water, but I would throw it back up. Anyways, I ended up not going to the hospital because I didn't want to pay the bill, and I fell asleep on my hotel bed, like with my like soaked like gear still on. Like I took off my rash guard, but I was in my sports bra and my shorts that were soaking wet. I slept for like 2 hours, and then I woke up and I drank like 2 liters of ginger ale. But yeah, all this to say, it was just like a crazy experience. Happy to have had it. But the no time limit matches are actually like um a totally different experience than I thought it would be.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it probably doesn't help as well that a lot of people, when they think of like no time limit matches, you kind of imagine, maybe it lasts half an hour, 40 minutes or something like that. But going for over 2 hours is a whole different ball game, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. Like I think also it's hard because it's like as soon as you get into a deficit position in the match, it's like because there's no time limit or points or anything, you kind of like your only goal really is to just like survive. And there's not the pressure of like, okay, well, if I survive but I finish the match and bottom out, I'll probably lose anyway, so I should try to get out, and that opens up submission. It's like, oh, actually, I could just focus 100% on like defending the submission, you know? And there was definitely moments where Hannah had me in like tough spots, and that's I was just like, okay, like she had me in a darts at one point. I was like, okay, just survive, you know. Versus if there was like, oh, there's a minute left, it's like, ooh, I kind of have to get out of this and like do something to win the match, you know. So it's actually like not as exciting in a way as like people like make it out. I feel like some people are like, oh, it should be sub only time, no time limit all the time. I'm like, actually, logistically, I don't know if that's like the best.
Yeah, you definitely can't build a whole event like that for sure because it just doesn't.
Yeah.
I think it only works the same sort of way you did it, and I know a few other people have done it, where you have a couple of regular matches and then one right at the end, main event in the evening. But then you do also run the same risk. Like I said, if it goes for like 2 hours, it's not great for spectators as well. Um, and then obviously after that and after trials, you did ADCC 2022. That's when you got the silver medal as well. Can I ask, what did you like take from that performance? Because obviously you had two really good wins straight at the beginning and then lost to Fionn in the final. So what did you take from the wins and the losses then, like moving forward?
So I would say I've like typically I don't want to go like too deep into this stuff. I've definitely had like not a super great like mindset towards competition. And it's something that I've been trying to work through. Sorry, not to like make it take a turn for mental health, but yeah, I think I've always kind of been super hard on myself. And I remember after ADCC 2022, like it's my first ADCC, I came in second place. Obviously it was like there was mistakes made in the final. But I had like zero pride in my performance in the event. And I was actually just like really devastated. Like I was just like didn't want to leave the house for 2 weeks. I was like embarrassed to show my face. So and I kind of never even like I couldn't even watch my matches. Like I was just like I don't want to see that, whatnot. So and then I kind of maintained that mindset for the past 2 years, and just recently over the past few months have been kind of really working on myself to fix that. So I would say that like to me, I didn't necessarily take that silver medal at ADCC. I didn't feel the pride that maybe I should have, you know. And obviously, you still want to like see the mistakes that you made and fix them. But I think all I saw was mistakes. So I think if there's any fellow competitors watching this, I can say that there's no longevity in that mindset, and that will come to bite you in the ass later. So definitely something to work on if that's how you speak to yourself throughout competition. So yeah, for me that it's been kind of like uh, a journey to get to a better mindset, I guess. I don't know what the original question was, but yeah.
No, that's good though, because it is just as important. Like I'm sure you know yourself now as well that like it's just as important to nail the mental aspect of competing as it is the physical and technical part of it as well. Um, and then obviously since ADCC, you've had another round at ADCC as well. And then I think the sort of the biggest win you've had so far then is what you're literally coming off right now, the crown. How did that feel, sort of finally reaching the highest? Well, I say finally, but reaching the highest point in a tournament like that, like a major invitational.
It felt phenomenal, and I think actually like what I was so happy about, and I would say I felt this way both at the Nogi Europeans a month prior and at the Crown, was that I just felt a lot more like I felt that all the work I'd put into myself was starting to pay off, and I felt super present in my matches, and I felt that pride. Like I remember coming home from Nogi Europeans, I was like, oh, not only did I win, but I felt like myself out there, and I felt good. Like I remember I fought like my quarterfinals in my division, and I was actually like hungry for the semifinals. Like I was excited to step out there. It wasn't like this like dread of like, oh, I hope I don't fuck this up. It was like, no, I'm gonna go out there and kill this, you know. And that was like such a good feeling that I felt I hadn't experienced like in a long time, if ever really to that point, you know. So then going into the crown, kind of the same thing, you know. I felt really like good in my matches. My first two wins were dominant, and then the finals was a super tight match. And I made mistakes in the final, but I was happy that one, I stayed present of mind enough to still be able to pull through with the victory. And then two, I felt like I could actually look at the mistakes I made and be like, okay, well, I actually watched the fight, which it seems like not that big a deal, but for me, like it really something I struggled with was watching myself fight. And I actually watched the fight like 2 days after the event, and I was like, oh, I see the mistake, and it's not that big a deal. That was like I let her get that grip, and I didn't recognize it for what it was, and she came up and got a near pass. It was like, okay, I'll fix that, you know, instead of like, oh, you know, you're terrible at jiu-jitsu. And so it's really cool to kind of see the mindset shift recently, and I hope to be able to keep kind of bringing that forward into my future matches. Yeah, win or lose.
Yeah, and obviously with the crown, you did it last year as well. I think the only person you lost to last year was obviously Louisa, the person who ended up winning, and she didn't come back this time around. Would you have preferred it if she was still in the bracket this time, or is that not something you really focus on?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely I think Louisa's like a legend. Like I think it's so cool that she both has been like winning huge titles with like kind of like the older generation, and then also like kicking us young guns in the ass, you know. So that's really cool to see. And obviously, I would have loved if she was part of the bracket. It was super cool to finally get to fight Gabby McComb, because that's actually another female athlete that I've like always admired, and I think that she's got really great jiu-jitsu, so I was like happy to get the match with her. But yeah, obviously would have been nice if Louisa was there too, but happy that I got my rematch with Janaina and that I got to finally face Gabby, so that was super cool. Yeah.
Awesome. And obviously we're coming towards the end of the year now. Are you planning on doing Nogi Worlds or any other super fights coming up in the next few weeks, or is that it for this year now?
Yeah, I'll probably do Nogi World. Just hammering out some travel details, but that'll probably be the last run before the holidays. Yeah.
Cool. And with Nogi Worlds, obviously it comes, like you said, right before the holidays, and then I assume you'll have a bit of a break at least because you've had quite a busy
Yeah.
year. Do you have any goals for next year or anything you sort of set in mind already, or just taking a break from now?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna try to stay relatively active. I definitely I've struggled a lot with injury over the past couple years as well, which I think probably played into the mindset stuff a bit too. So I think finally my body is kind of like feeling relatively healthy. So I kind of want to take advantage, kind of stay into a flow of like competing happy, not putting too much pressure on myself, but just kind of showing up to any competition that I feel excited about. Yeah.
Cool. And is there any particular matches you're looking forward to? Like you said, you eager to get to face Gabby McComb. Is there anyone else like that you would want to face next year that you haven't before?
Um, I'm so bad. As soon as someone asks me for like specific things, my mind just goes absolutely blank. I would just say, yeah, I think for me, it's just gonna be about like showing up, feeling good is gonna be the main focus. And then I think that'll just like slowly get me all the matches that I have on my dream list.
Yeah, that's fair enough. And obviously, with ADCC coming back up again in about 2 years' time now, we're still a bit away off preparing for it, obviously. But for you personally, do you know if you'll have to go back through trials again, or do you not have any idea about that yet?
Yeah, I don't really know. I guess it definitely could be on the cards, since I finished fourth. Yeah, so trials or, I mean, either way, yeah, trials, no trials, we'll get it done.
Fair enough. And with ADCC as well, they've obviously split the weight classes now. So one thing I was sort of not sure about originally was whether you would drop down to 55 or up to 65, because I think from what I've seen, you're kind of one of those unfortunate women that actually fits 60 kilos better than the other two weight classes. Um, Is that the case for you? Are you sort of better off in the old weight class rather than the two new ones?
Yeah, I'll definitely say that the 60-kilo weight class was kind of like that sweet spot for me. I did go back and forth for a long time over whether I wanted to be in the 65 or the 55. And then also the change to the day before weigh-ins kind of made that like choice. So first I was leaning 65 because I was like, well, at least they weigh us 3 times, so like people won't be able to cut that much weight, you know? And then they changed the day before weigh-ins, and I was like, oh, now should I go 55? Because people are going to cut like quite a bit of weight to make 65. So definitely, yeah, definitely like the 60 kilo, but happy that there's more women's divisions overall. So I guess we'll see closer to the event, you know, where my body weight has kind of just like naturally fluctuated, and then make the decision off of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it is still 2 years away, so you got a lot can happen in that space of time as well. And looking back at what you mentioned about the rules in the province changing recently, I know obviously now that they have changed, you've seen a lot more like ADCC Opens in Canada and that sort of thing. I think there's been like 3 or 4 over the last year or two.
Mm-hmm.
Would you fancy doing like smaller events like that just to sort of like keep active in the local area, or is it not something that you're really sort of focusing on?
I would say like I'm not closed off to anything. But yeah, I would say like if I feel like again excited about doing like a local tournament, I might jump in. But I also like, I don't know, there's something like, yeah, I don't know, I guess maybe an extra like pressure or whatnot that like about competing locally, you know, that like I don't know, it almost feels like scarier to me than like than competing on like on like a big stage like last weekend or something. I definitely like I struggle a lot with like pressure I put on myself. So I think if I was like, oh my God, everyone I know is like in this gym, like 2 feet away watching me and not like maybe at least across the country on a screen, um, seems like more daunting. And then obviously too, it's nice to like do events that get me like I guess like either like titles or like I can get paid for obviously.
Yeah.
I think it's like realistically what I want to focus a little bit more on for sure.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And it's funny you mentioned being paid as well, because obviously one of the biggest sort of like storylines this year was ADCC and CJI and stuff like that. I know they focused on men's divisions this time around, but if they do decide to, if Craig does decide to like open up any women's divisions in the future, I'm assuming that's something you'd be interested in as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like I think like the event looked spectacular. I think the pit like was really cool. It was a really cool way of kind of dealing with the boundary issues that plague jiu-jitsu. So yeah, I'd be like super interested in competing on the event for sure.
Awesome. That's pretty much everything I wanted to go through with you, really. But is there anything that you want to, anyone that you want to sort of give thanks to or give a shout out to or anything like that?
I mean, just you know, all my friends and family who support me all the time, and my sponsor Hyperfly for keeping me on the mats training and everything. Yeah, just the usual crew. I hate naming people because again, I just forget. I'm like, it's gonna be someone that I didn't shout out. That's gonna be like, oh, she didn't mention me. So yeah.
No worries. It's like you said, you don't want to name 5 people and miss out the 6th person that isn't going to be happy with you.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
yeah. Well, thanks so much for your time as well, and take it easy. All right.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a good day.